Hi guys, my name is Caitlin Wood, and this is the co-parenting and divorce class for family builders. It is going to be done virtually today, so I hope you enjoy this video. It is going to be long. The class is a 4-hour class, so I'm going to try to make this as non-painful for you and me both. But like I said, my name is Caitlin Wood, and I will be your facilitator for today, and this is the co-parenting and divorce curriculum. So housekeeping, usually we give you guys when you come into the office and participate in class a resource guide, and it has resources like food pantry, counseling, domestic violence services, and just various things. So obviously done virtually, we don't have that resource guide to give you. However, I still want to make sure that you guys are getting the resources you need. So if you call up there, you can call Family Builders. We are closed because we are considered non-essential. However, we can be contacted at 405-232-8226. You can leave us a voicemail, and we will return that message of they're being checked at various times. So we'll return that message when we get a chance to. You can also send a text message to 405-400-0447. That's the Family Builders number, and they will help you as best as they know how to. I want to also remind you guys that this course is child focused, so we are going to remain child focused. We're not talking about you and your spouse's issues or necessarily how to be a parent. We're going to figure out how we can navigate through co-parenting with keeping the child's best interest at mind. Something else I want to remind you of, we give our participants, when we're in-house, a piece of paper that talks about their certificate. So at the end of the course, you're going to receive the certificate. I don't know how that works, if it's going to be mailed to you electronically, I don't know, but you will receive a certificate. And make sure you keep that certificate in a good place, because if you lose their certificate, for a copy of it, it's going to cost you $10. And then for a new hard copy of it, an original copy, it's going to cost you $25. And so I don't want you guys to have to pay extra money. If you guys can make sure you keep that certificate in a safe place and get it to where you need to go. Another frequently asked question is, if we send this to the courts or to attorneys, we do not do anything with it. The certificate is yours. Once you leave the classroom, and it is your responsibility to get it to who it needs to go to. So just make sure that once you get that certificate and the certificate has left your hands, that you get it to the right people and you make a copy of it, or you keep it safe, because we don't want that to get lost or lost. I am supposed to tell you my credentials, so I will go ahead and do that. My name is Caitlin Wood. Like I said, I have a master's in healthcare administration. I have previously worked in child welfare. I've been with the Family Builders for almost 2 years, a little over 1.5 years, creeping up on that 2-year mark. I teach the Batterers Intervention Program, the 52-week course for domestic violence offenders. I teach that twice a week, and then I also teach the co-parenting for divorced parents class. Like I said, I have previously been in child welfare. I am currently still a state employee, just not in child welfare. I think that's all of our housekeeping that we need to do before we move on. I'm sorry, this is an adjustment for me as well to be virtual for you guys. And so I did make this PowerPoint. However, I'm going to be following the curriculum guide. So there is things that's not on the PowerPoint that are in the curriculum guide that I'm going to read. So if you see me looking down, I'm looking at the curriculum, but going to be reading this to you. So just bear with me. So the goal of co-parenting, also it's going to be referred to as COP for short throughout the presentation, just so you know, is to offer children of divorce the opportunity to grow in a home environment free of being caught in the middle of their parents' conflicts and the emotional roller coaster that results. So our goals are to explore short and long-term effects of divorce, Educate parents regarding the option of reconciliation. Educate parents on potential child behaviors and emotional state during and after divorce and responding in a positive manner. Educate parents on issues of anger management, communication, and conflict resolution, and provide a resource list of community services that could be helpful. Like I said, we don't have that, obviously we're virtual, we don't have that resource guide for you. However, if you do want a resource guide, once we reopen, we'd be happy to provide that to you, or you can call the office. You can also call 211, which is the Oklahoma resource line, and get a variety of resources that way. And that resource guide is also available online. Just Google 211 Oklahoma resources, and that link should pop up. So this class was based off the 2014 law. So we base our curriculum and our goals and requirements for that class based off that law. So if you want to give us feedback on things that you liked or didn't like after this class, we'd be happy to hear that as well. Okay, so let's look at the introduction. So family relationships do not disappear when a marriage ends in separation or divorce. We like to compare it to a death in the family because grieving is involved. There's a loss. There's a new way of life that has to kind of be altered. The ability to interact with one another greatly impacts the child's post-divorce adjustment. So we're saying that you and your partner's or ex-partner's ability to get along and co-parent impacts the child's post-divorce adjustment. So if you're doing that well, there's a greater likelihood that your child is going to adjust more appropriately and minimize those behaviors, those negative behaviors. However, if there's a lot of conflict, there's a higher possibility that your child is going to have poor adjustment. A child's adjustment to divorce is determined in part by how well divorcing parents share joint responsibility of raising their child in a cooperative atmosphere. So it's a causal relationship. If you're raising your child in that cooperative atmosphere, your child's adjustment is more than likely going to be great. So just think, the more I can try to be a co-parent, do my part to be a co-parent, the greater likelihood my child is going to adjust better to this divorce process. Unrelenting parental conflict is the single most common cause of poor adjustment in children following a divorce. So you and your partner not getting along is the single most common cause of poor adjustment in children following a divorce. If parental conflict is not treated, children may develop serious psychological difficulties that will continue into adulthood. So I don't know if you guys have heard of the ACE study or ACE scores, so you can Google it. And ACE studies or ACE scores, it's a set of 10 questions, and ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. So the study basically says the more ACE score, the higher your ACE score, or the more ACEs that have happened to you, the greater likelihood you are to go to have problems into adulthood. And divorce is one of those ACE study or ACE questions. So think about that. And there's other things like violence in the home that's on there. So it's a set of 10 questions, and it doesn't matter which ones happened to the child or which ones have happened to you. It just matters how many. So these ACEs are kind of equal. It's like no one is worse than the other, so they don't care about which ones, we just care about how many. So think about that. Think about the trauma that divorce can cause and how we want to mitigate that or minimize that by creating a good atmosphere for our child, remaining child focused, and a good co-parenting relationship. And I would suggest all of you guys Google ACE studies, ACE scores. It's a great thing to know about, great thing to read about. It's a great quiz for you to take, great activity. I've had a lot of parents do it with their kids and have that open discussion with their kids. And I think it can foster some really great conversations. All right, so if we were in class right now, I'd be on a whiteboard and I'd be asking you guys to brainstorm co-parenting, what goes into it, how, what do you need, are you doing it well, etc. However, you guys are seeing me through a screen, so What I want you guys to do is I want you to pause the video, take 2 to 3 minutes, and brainstorm co-parenting. Brainstorm what goes into co-parenting. And then what do you need? And then think about this. Are you doing co-parenting well? Are you and your ex-partner co-parenting well together? If not, what's missing from your brainstorm list? Maybe you have shared responsibilities on there, but you and your ex-partner are not sharing responsibilities well. And think about how you can change that throughout this course. How can you get to what you need to get a better co-parenting relationship? So I've kind of brainstormed co-parenting on my own to give you guys a list of little starter ideas. So I think, co-parenting is communication, shared responsibilities, supporting each other's decisions, aware of one another's roles, and have a common goal, which we talked about in this class. We are to remain child focused. So like I said, pause the video, take 5 minutes. So you're going to want to pause the video anyways, because like I said, this is supposed to be a 4-hour course, and you're seeing me virtually, no interaction in the classroom, no break. So you're going to want to take a break anyways, and this will be a great way to kind of break up listening to me talk. All right, so let's talk about the benefits of co-parenting through divorce. So it helps parents rebuild their lives as separate individuals, teaches effective communication and conflict resolution skills helpful in their parenting relationship. So we talk about this in class. You are responsible for what you say and do. A lot of times I get a question of, well, what if my partner's doing this or that? How should I respond? Or, I'm trying to be a co-parent. They're not trying to be a co-parent. And you have to remember, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your ex-partner is saying or doing. I mean, it does matter. But essentially, it does not matter because you're responsible for what you say and do. And your kid is going to see that. Your children or your child is going to see that in the end. So remember, you are responsible for what you say and do. Yes, we want your ex-partner, we want both of you to be committed to that co-parenting relationship, but your communication and your conflict resolution skills, you are responsible, ultimately the one responsible for what you say and do and bring to the table in this co-parenting relationship. It helps parents recognize the bond between the child and both parents, fosters sensitivity to the child's needs, focuses on present child-rearing issues rather than past marital issues, directs parents to accept responsibility for their own actions. And if these things are happening, it's our hope that children will have reduced symptoms of stress as parental conflict decreases, have diminished sense of being caught in loyalty binds. We will talk about loyalty binds later on. Create a more relaxed home atmosphere, allowing children to adjust more effectively. Learn effective communication and conflict resolution skills as modeled by their parents. Increases the likelihood of keeping 2 active parents in their lives. Reduces the likelihood of adolescent drug and alcohol problems, teenage pregnancy, dropping out of school, and crime. So all these are negative coping behaviors, and we're not saying those are not going to exist just because you're being a good co-parent. We're just saying our hope is that the negative behaviors or negative coping mechanisms decrease if we're having and maintaining a good co-parenting relationship. And have a decreased likelihood of relationship difficulties and divorce in the future. All right, so let's look at what is divorce. So divorce, according to Google, is a dissolution of a marriage or intimate relationship. So like I already said, divorce is like experiencing a death in the family. Grieving is involved. Someone's no longer in your life. There's a high level of emotion and stress involved to make this transition. It impacts all aspects of your life, financial, social, sexual, emotional, etc. It can force you to move, be sudden or prolonged, and there's multiple losses that go along with that grieving process. All right, so I want you to stop and I want you to do another activity. So I want you to pull up a picture on your phone of your children or your child, or Go to your house wherever you're watching this, pull out a picture of them from wherever, and think back to when your child or your children were toddlers and preschoolers. Maybe they still are preschoolers or toddlers, but think about how much trust your children had in you, and how much you wanted to protect them, right? Whenever we have a newborn baby, we want to protect them. We want to keep them safe from everything in this world. And I want you to realize how important you are still to that child for the very same reason. You want to protect them. Protection is a natural instinct for parents, and that never goes away. No matter their age, you still want to protect them. So through this class, we're going to remain child-focused, which you've already heard me say about 5 or 6 times. You're probably going to hear me say it 5 or 6 more times. And you're going to learn how to keep your child from harm as you navigate the hazardous divorce process. And our hope is that you're going to keep your child from harm by increasing your co-parenting relationship with your ex-partner. So like I said, take 5 minutes. This is another little good break activity. Really think through about how when they were little, how much trust they had on you, how much you wanted to protect them, and then think about how much you still want to protect them, right? I know my mom says, you're always going to be my little girl. You're always going to be my baby. I'm always going to keep you safe. That's why, she says she calls me 10 times a day. And so I know you guys can relate as parents. It never goes away, that instinct to protect or keep your child safe. And so think about remaining child-focused through co-parenting, because that's going to keep your child safe and protect them from the hazardous divorce process, because that's our goal of this class. All right, so based on the law and the curriculum, we're required to talk about reconciliation, and maybe some of you have considered reconciliation, and maybe some of you have not, depending on where you're at in your divorce process. That's okay either way. If you want to tune me out during reconciliation, I tell the people in my class, that's fine. We're going to pick back up with our divorce curriculum. If you want to hear what we have to say about reconciliation, that's great too. So in class, I would be handing you out 2 articles to read about reconciliation that we would read together. However, we're not in class, obviously, and so I am going to kind of walk you through these articles. So the first one is an article that is called 5 Questions You Need to Ask Yourself Before You Decide to Divorce. So it says, before deciding to divorce, you need to consider the following. Have you done everything you can to save and rehabilitate your marriage? Have you exhausted all avenues of help for putting your marriage back together? That could mean reading books, going to a marriage counselor, speaking to a clergy member, and spending time focusing on your own role and the demise of your relationship. Ask yourself, what was your marriage like when it worked? When did it go wrong, and why? Is what you're fighting about worth breaking up your marriage? What do you want? What is it costing you to be in your relationship? Are you willing to put in the effort to make your relationship work? What are you doing to contaminate the relation? Do you have unfinished emotional business, is the second question it asks. The time when you're ready for divorce is when you have the clearest of conscience, when you can say, I'm at peace about my decision, I'm at peace about myself, I'm at peace about going through the next phase of my life. If you can walk out the door without anger, frustration, or hurt, then you are ready. Unless and until you can look each other in the eye, feeling no hatred or resentment, you're not ready for a divorce. Also, it suggests that you should not make life-changing decisions in the midst of emotional turmoil. Such consequential decisions should not be made when tensions are high. Get on flat ground first so you can look at things more rationally. So you need to ask yourself, are you still in love with your spouse? Are you hurt? Are you scared? Are you angry? Are you confused? If you answered yes to any of those questions, you failed the test. This is not the time to make life-changing decisions. You have more work to do. Number 3, it says, have you researched, planned, and prepared yourself legally to divorce? I'm not going to read this section because I assume if you're in here, you have researched, planned, or prepared yourself to some point or degree. Number 4, are you ready to adopt a new standard of conduct with your children? You don't involve children in adult issues. You should not burden your children with your emotions about the situation. Kids should not be put in a position where they have to help a parent cope and survive the turmoil. Don't rob your children of a childhood and the freedom that comes from being a kid. And then the last question it says is, are you willing to create a new relationship as a co-parent? Just because your marriage may be ending doesn't mean your relationship will end. If you have a child or children together, you will always be parents. And it is your responsibility to create a new relationship as co-parents, co-allies of your children. Although it may be difficult for you to interact with your ex, you must find a way to be amicable. You must be ready to set aside the emotions and put your child's best interest above your own. If you want out of a marriage, earn your way out. Turn over every stone, investigate every avenue of rehabilitation. So when the day comes that your child looks at you and says, Mom, Dad, why did I have to grow up with just one parent? You don't have to say, we just quit having fun. You could be able to say, look, we did everything we could. We went to counselors, we read books, we prayed, we did this, we did that, and we decided it was best for everybody if we lived separately but loved you kids together. If you can't say that with peace in your heart, then you're not ready for divorce. So, family impacted by abuse and other dangers are encouraged to put safety first and get professional help before deciding to reconcile with an abusive partner in a relationship. So reconciliation might not be even an option for you, and we understand and we want, child focused, and part of that is keeping our child safe. So that's what comes first and foremost. So some things to consider before moving on for reconciliation is, what was the motive for reconciliation? If it was money, kids, finances, the house, security of having a partner, none of those are good reasons to get a divorce. Are both parents equally willing to do whatever is needed to correct the issues that cause the divorce request? So if you're not willing to work at it and work hard at it diligently, then it's not going to work out. Are you both willing to participate in counseling? Successful reconciliation requires the help of an effective, reputable therapist, and even then, the prospects for success are dim. So we don't mean that to be mean or to be rude. We're just saying that reconciliation is a lot of work, and it should be taken very seriously, because if we are remaining child-focused, we don't want to keep our kids in limbo any more than they have to be, right? It's better for them to move on with two parents that can effectively co-parent and dragging them through the mud of mom and dad being together, mom and dad being apart, mom and dad being together, and mom and dad being apart. So if you're going to reconcile, take that very seriously, take it very slow, and know that you have to be committed. Reconciliation only works if both parties really want the marriage to work and are willing to work hard at the process of change and forgiveness. So it's important for your child to know that violence is never their fault. Violence by one parent against another is never okay. Their job is to stay safe, not to stop the violence or try to protect the parent. They don't have to keep their feelings inside, and they should share fears, angers, or any other feelings. In regards to domestic violence, if you need assistance with that, you can call the resource line at 211. You can also call Family Builders office. Like I said, we are currently closed, so you'll have to leave us a voicemail, but we will get back to that voicemail as soon as we can. And that number again is 232-8226. I want to look at one more handout about reconciliation. This is reconciliation after a divorce, and then we will move on from reconciliation. So divorce is not always a permanent situation. Some divorced couples may decide that they want to give their marriage another chance and rebuild their broken relationship into a better, more enduring one. Attempting to reconcile can bring its own set of challenges, so you need to take certain things into consideration. If you sincerely want to succeed with putting your marriage back together, so steps for successful reconciliation. 1, make sure you want to reconcile your marriage for all the right motives. We previously talked about money, marriage, kids, money, financial security, kids. None of those are good reasons. 2, get to the root cause of what problems caused your marriage to disintegrate in the first place. Since it may be difficult to discuss these things honestly on your own, the wisest thing would be to seek help from a professional marriage counselor who can aid you in determining the factors that cause your relationship to fall apart. Since a counselor can be objective, he or she can help you define the areas of conflict and assist you in resolving your differences. Number 3, take things slow. Never allow yourself to be pressured into rushing into reconciliation. It takes time to rebuild trust and to learn to communicate with each other. Jumping into renewing your marriage before you are ready for it could result in yet another failure of your relationship. So only make a commitment when both of you are prepared to do so. Number 4, learn to focus on the positive. Divorced couples are so used to putting the emphasis on the faults, mistakes, and shortcomings of each other that they fail to remember all the things that made them fall in love. Concentrate on each other's strengths and learn to appreciate your spouse's best qualities. 5, communicate with each other. So many marriages disintegrate because a couple stops communicating. Share your expectations. Be honest. If you feel hurt, be willing to listen to each other's point of view. Talk things out in a loving, respectful way and never let your anger get out of hand. Number 6, forgive. Before you can proceed towards reconciliation, you and your spouse need to wipe the slate clean of past grudges and hurts. See your relationship as a new beginning and let go of old resentments. And form your family only after reconciliation is definite. Naturally, your children may be hoping for you and your spouse to get back together. And if you raise their hopes prematurely, it could be devastating. Letting your spouse move back into your home too soon could cause confusion. When your relationship seems to be more solid footing, then you can let your kids know that you and your ex-spouse plan to reunite. Okay, so that's going to wrap up reconciliation. Now we're going to move back to talking about what we experience when divorce is in the works. And like we said previously, part of the divorce process is experiencing grief, and this is normal, and it's going to be felt by both parties, and it's going to be felt by the children to some degree. So we're going to talk about the stages of grief. I don't know if you have taught or read about I think it's 7 stages of grief. Yes, 7 stages of grief. So we're going to work through those 7 stages of grief and talk about it. What I do want to mention and talk about before we get started is these are very fluid. They're not siloed. So once you're done with the shock, it's not like, okay, I'm done with shock. I'm moving on to denial now. You might move on to guilt and shame and feel like you're, maybe processing a little bit and then go back to the denial phase. And you might get all the way to the hope process and then go back to being angry. And that's perfectly okay. We just don't want to get stuck in one of these phases. Because if we get stuck in one of these phases, then more than likely our children are also going to be stuck there because our children are experiencing these stages of grief as well. So it's okay to kind of have some setbacks as long as in general you're moving forward. So in general, if we're moving forward down that continuum to get to acceptance, that's okay because we know and accept that there's going to be setbacks. But we just can't get stuck and let ourselves continue to spin our wheels because we do have to process it and move on with our lives. Okay, so the first stage of grief is shock. So this stage is often described by people as feeling completely numb. Some people notice a kind of panic that accompanies, precedes, or follows the numbness. You may have a hard time concentrating or even expressing yourself when you are in this stage of grief. The second stage is denial. When people stubbornly refuse to grieve, they are said to be in denial. Since grief is painful, most people try to put it off, at least temporarily. You might hear people say, I don't care anyway, she was never there for me anyways. However, if your denial continues, it may be impossible for the person to move on to healthier stages of life. And moving on to guilt and shame. Feelings of guilt and shame emerge when you examine what you might have done to cause the divorce or what you did to have hurt the other person. So your thoughts might begin with, if I only done this differently, maybe it was because of this, I should have done this, I shouldn't have done that. Guilt and shame are accompanied with those kinds of phrases. So the next phase is the anger phase, and we're going to talk about anger more in depth later on in the curriculum. So anger is often present during this process, and it may take the form of blaming the former spouse, not only for initiating the divorce, but also for destroying your dream of the perfect family and home. It may be even toward yourself for your inability, to prevent the divorce. Or it may be turned outward toward your children, your in-laws, or someone else. So the next phase is the bargaining and depression phase of the divorce. So grieving often brings feelings of isolation and loneliness. This is often the case in divorce. Almost as a last effort before resolving some of the grief is a last stand at bargaining with God, with oneself, or with one's former partner. When the last big effort doesn't work, one often experiences depression to a greater or lesser degree. Hope. So this is where the things are on the uptick. You kind of experience the harsher stages of grief, and you're kind of looking forward to the future at this. Here, hope is part of the resolution process, meaning you begin to look forward to the future. It's the stage where you believe the worst is behind you and start focusing on what is ahead of you. And then the last phase is the acceptance phase. In this final stage, sadness is felt but is shared with an acceptance that there's no going back. Acceptance does not only deny the pain of the experience or the joy of past experiences. Instead, it accepts the present as the only alternative and leaves you ready to face the future. So like I said, your child is experiencing these stages of grief, and so I just want to kind of touch on validating their feelings, not criticizing them, and they might have feelings of blame for your spouse creating these feelings in your child, and so you want to be really careful as you walk that road, especially when you're working on your co-parenting relationship. And so in class, we talk about counseling for our children, how many are in counseling, if counseling's helping them, and kind of cultivate that kind of conversation. Obviously, we're not in class, so some just thinkers for you are your kids in counseling? Have your kids been in counseling? Do you need a resource for counseling? If you need a resource for counseling, Family Builders can definitely be that resource for you and get you to the right place. And I also want to touch on why it's important to have counseling for your children. So it gives your children an outlet and an opportunity to express themselves to a third party, especially if they're having really strong emotions, maybe even towards you, and they don't want to express those because they're afraid to hurt your feelings. But those feelings that your child is experiencing are valid and they need to be shared. So having a third party to do that for them is really great. And it allows also the counselor to be a barrier between you and your co-parent. If your child's not wanting to go to visitation or spend time with the other partner, your ex, and the other parent, you don't have to say he's not, or little Sally Joe is not wanting to go with you today, Robert. So I'm sorry. Because then that can excite some, well, you're alienating me, these kinds of feelings. Whereas if this child's expressing this to the counselor can be that third party and kind of work through that with you, Robert, and Sally Joe, instead of you being the bearer of bad news and you having to carry that burden, and most likely create some conflict between you and the co-parent. And it also gives an opportunity to resolve differences as a family through a third party. And so maybe you guys are really struggling, you and Robert are really struggling with Sally Joe's homework or Sally Joe's bedtime. And you're having a really hard time walking this road together as a co-parent. And you have very different views on it. You know, you think Sally Joe's bedtime should be at 7. Robert thinks Sally Joe shouldn't have a bedtime. You guys can't find a happy medium. But if you walk that road with a counselor, you can kind of, they can be that third party and help you resolve those family differences and help you be better co-parents for little Sally Joe. Excuse me. Additionally, if you don't do counseling for your children, there are books and resource guides out there. People have already reinvented the wheel for you in terms of explaining divorce to your children, explaining emotions, grieving processes, etc. So I would encourage you. I know right now the local libraries are not open, but Amazon has great resources on there. Online has great resources. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel and figure out how we're going to explain this to them because someone has already done that, and that's great. So we should utilize those resources. All right, so now we've kind of talked about what is divorce, maybe reconciliation, the grieving process. So now we're going to talk about disengaging, which we're going to talk about letting go of the divorce and moving on. That's kind of what we're moving towards here. So as the divorce process moves forward, letting go of a relationship with one spouse is important. We give this kind of letting go after divorce a new term. It's called disengaging. This means disconnecting, separating, letting go of the old relationship, and getting on with one's own life. Despite the pain of making the transition to the new role, it is necessary to let go of the old relationship and the old life in order to move on and create a new one, a new life for oneself. So you're going to let go of the emotional tie to the former spouse, let go of thoughts of revenge, and let go of anger and hurt. Children also experience disengagement and feel the pain of disengagement to a greater extent than the parent because they do not fully understand the situation that caused the divorce. Children need to have their feelings validated, and they often need assistance making the adjustment necessary to go on in their new relationships with their parents. Professional help is available and can often make the transition easier for everyone in the family. So professional help, counseling, like we just previously talked about, can also help with this disengagement process. Do not hesitate to ask for professional assistance with helping your child deal with grief or disengagement issues, because a child is going to need to let go of the emotional to the nuclear family and the security they had in that life, let go of thoughts of revenge, ways to get even with one or both parents, let go of hurt and anger they feel towards both parents, one for leaving and the other one for not making them stay. So while disengagement can be really scary, it's obviously a really tough time because it's a huge transition period filled with a bunch of changes. And us as humans, we run away from change a lot of times. So disengaging is a really tough time. However, there are a lot of positives to this disengaging in the divorce process and moving on. So for both the parent and the child, the positives of disengaging are starting to enjoy life again, start taking responsibility for oneself, start to have a life again, taking control empowers someone to make things better, greater happiness in life, greater self-esteem, and learning to depend on oneself, and stop being independent again. Okay, so this next thing is, like I said, once again, if we were in the classroom, you would be brainstorming with me on a whiteboard. However, you're not in the classroom, obviously. And so this is another great activity. Take a 5-minute pause, a 5-minute break, because this is, a lot of material to take in, a lot to listen to. and brainstorm the advantages of co-parenting. And what you see as an advantage, other person might not see as an advantage. So brainstorm what the advantages of being an effective co-parent are, and maybe you already know some of those advantages because you and your partner have effectively been co-parenting. So some advantages I thought of was happier children. Children learn how to treat others appropriately, and it teaches good conflict resolution skills. All right, let's talk about the co-parenting relationship. So there are 6 main characteristics of co-parenting. So the individuals are committed to a win-win relationship. Both want a continued long-term effective relationship so they can do the best for their children. The individuals negotiate differences when they disagree or when new circumstances arise. When issues such as a change to visitation schedule due to birthday party or vacation schedule, they negotiate in good faith to minimize the loss for the child. So we need to talk about quality versus quantity when we're talking about this. You can spend 300 days out of 365 days with your child and not have a good quality relationship. Where the other parent could spend 65 of the 365 days with the relationship of 360. Okay, let's start over. One parent can spend 300 of the 365 days with that child and not have a good quality relationship with them. However, the other parent could spend 65 days of the 365 days with the child and have a great quality relationship with them. And so when you are working on visitation schedules or working things out, just remember, is 5 minutes or 1 day really going to matter in the grand scheme of things? Probably not, because it's over quality over quantity. And just remember that. You want to spend as much time as you can with your child. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that 1 day going to matter in the grand scheme of things? No, because if you're spending and creating quality relationships and connection with your child in that time you have with them, then that 1 day is not going to matter in the grand scheme of things. You guys might need a legal custody or visitation schedule to have an okay co-parenting relationship. And if that's something you have to have, then that's something you have to have. The relationship is limited to specific topics and objectives. They don't discuss decisions such as who they are dating. They do discuss child-focused issues. If a former partner is in a new relationship, remember it's your responsibility to be sure your child is safe with a new person in your ex's life. Do your checking responsibly, calmly, and with the child's best interest in mind. And so, to make sure your kid's safe, make sure your ex is not, dating a criminal or a drug dealer. That's one thing. But to question your child 1,000 questions about this person, not appropriate, right? Or to confront your ex-partner when you might not have all the information or you might not have all the facts, that's not appropriate. Don't base this off assumptions, right? And so remember, when you're keeping your conversations with your ex-partner, don't talk about who they're seeing or what they might be doing. Talk about the child. Remember, you're to remain child-focused. The individuals observe common courtesies. So calls are made during normal working hours, voice tone is pleasant and not demanding. So our hope to you is through this class, learning how to be a good co-parent, is that you guys are going to oh, I lost my train of thought. You guys are going to have face-to-face communication. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It's our goal that you're going to have that face-to-face communication. However, some of you guys might not be there right now, and for whatever reason. If you have to have conversations over text messages where it can be recorded and where there's a record of conversation, then that's what you have to do. And that's a boundary you have to set, right? If the boundary is you have to have everything recorded, then you're not going to have a phone conversation or a face-to-face conversation with them. Our hope is that eventually you'll have as many face-to-face conversations as possible, because face-to-face communication is the best way to communicate. However, not right now with coronavirus, right? But face-to-face communication is the best way to communicate if at all possible, because if I'm over a text message or over the phone, you can't read my body language, you can't read the nonverbal cues that I'm giving out while I'm communicating, and then that causes for flaws or slips in communications, which can then cause miscommunication. And we obviously want to mitigate and avoid that as much as possible within our co-parenting relationship. The individuals communicate with facts, not feelings. They base discussions on facts rather than on emotions of the two parents, so don't make assumptions. In class, we always make the joke, do we know how to spell assume? And so do not say something if you do not know it is a fact. Keep your mouth shut. I don't know how to express that any more clearly. Do not assume and do not open your mouth, because that is just going to cause problems and conflict for you and your co-parents. So also use your training on how to be a co-parent to train the grandparents, your aunts and uncles, how to respond and act in this co-parenting relationship. It's your responsibility that your parents, your sister, your brother, are not making inappropriate comments about your ex-partner, and it's also your ex-partner's responsibility to make sure their family is not saying naughty or dirty things about you. If we're remaining child-focused and we're working on that co-parenting relationship, we also want our extended family and our community members surrounding the child to be committed to that co-parenting positive relationship as well. Okay. Ooh, this is a lot of information, guys. Okay, we're moving on to a child's reaction to divorce. Okay. So this is going to be broken out based on ages. However, there are some common reactions for every child that include separation anxiety or clingy behavior, aggressiveness, withdrawal, low frustration, tolerance, eating and sleeping disturbances, sensitivity to criticism, and physical complaints. So many of these reactions are a result of guilt, grief, and shame that we talked about earlier. Don't become angry with your child for something that is natural for a child to feel. We're going to explore some of the behaviors that you might expect from your child. We will do this by age level. At any age level, you can expect to see some of these issues increase or decrease as the stress of the divorce process plays out. Okay, so first we're going to talk about infants and toddlers. So while infants and toddlers might not be able to understand what's going on or understand what's being said between you and your ex-partner, they can hear and feel the tension. And research has shown that even babies in utero can hear and feel tension. So just think, just because my baby was sleeping in the other room does not mean it does not hear or feel that tension that you and your ex-parent or your ex-partner are engaging in or have engaged in. So infants and toddlers depend upon their parents for their basic care as well as emotional stability. Toddlers are likely to develop powerful worries over being separated from a parent. 3 factors generally add to their state of confusion and anxiety: dramatic changes in daily routines and schedules, emotional distress of one or both parents, conflict between parents. So infants and toddlers may exhibit a loss of developmental accomplishment, such as returning to the bottle, bedwetting, waking in the night. If they're walking, they might return to crawling. They might refuse previously enjoyed foods. Demonstrate fear by becoming clingy and refusing to separate from the parent. exhibit intense feelings of frustration and anger through yelling, biting, hitting, throwing toys, banging their head. So if your child goes to daycare and they haven't been a biter, you might now be getting reports when you pick them up of them biting, and that could be due in part to the divorce process. Become extremely angry when basic needs are overlooked or when caretaking schedules are unpredictable. Appear listless and withdrawn. All right, let's talk about preschoolers. Preschoolers begin developing some capacity for abstract thinking, yet they lack the cognitive skills to fully understand the concept of divorce. They have trouble distinguishing reality from fantasy, and so they might believe if dad left them, mom can leave them too. They also might come to the conclusion that whichever parent left the home no longer loves them. It is common for preschoolers to believe that their misbehavior is responsible for the divorce. Under these circumstances, children often experience fear, confusion, and guilt, and preschoolers may exhibit a loss of developmental accomplishments. They might return to the bottle, they might be potty trained, and revert back to not being potty trained. They could cry frequently, have difficulty sleeping and or delay the bedtime. Especially if one parent moved out while the child is sleeping, they might be afraid the other parent will leave them too if they go to bed, so they might have trouble sleeping or refusal to go to sleep for that reason. Exhibit more temper tantrums, exhibit anger or aggression towards parents, siblings, and other children, have difficulty separating from parent, lose interest in pleasurable activities, food, and candy, eat less or eat more, worry about who will take care of them and where they're going to live, appear subdued, joyless, listless, and withdrawn. So it's really important that you communicate your love for the child and your love for the child during this time. Each parent express that to the preschooler so they're really feeling secure. All right, early elementary school. So this is ages 6 to 8. Children between these ages depend on security of family structure. They develop love and trust in their family unit. Children this age depend on parents for safety, security, and self-esteem. At times, they may find themselves caught in the middle of their parents' battles. They are likely to experience an emotional tug-of-war. 8-year-old children are likely to struggle to maintain allegiance to both parents. Children may assume the role of a messenger, exchanging the complaints of angry parents. Likewise, children this age may be enlisted as spies, responding to frequent questions from one parent to the other parent. So during this stage, you might start telling your child that they're man of the house now. They may take on a caretaker role. And we have to be really careful to do that because if we say you're the man of the house now, little Joey, they may take that seriously and be like, oh, I have to provide for my mom. I have to be there for us. Dad's not here anymore. And so they may take on that caretaker role, and it might be inappropriate at times. Now, they might just take on a role and start helping you out, making sure the chores are done. And those things are okay. We just have to make sure as parents that they are not crossing that line and not getting the wrong idea or picture. And so we need to remind them at the end of the day, they're still kids and their job is to be a kid, and our job is to be the parent and take care of the adult responsibilities. All right, so 6 to 8-year-olds may be preoccupied with feelings of guilt, loss, sadness, rejection, fear, and insecurity. Deeply fear that they will be replaced by a new step-parent, step-sibling, or a significant other. Cry easily, act cranky, become anxious, become distractible, and have a difficulty concentrating, which could lead to poor academic performance. Complain of stomach aches, headaches, and other physical complaints. So I actually had a parent tell me that I think it was their 6 or 7-year-old child was complaining of stomach aches. And they just thought, they're having some upset stomach, something they ate. Well, the problem continued, and actually because of the divorce process, this child was so stressed out that they developed an ulcer in their stomach. And so we have to take these when they're saying stomach aches, headaches, other physical complaints. So they could be trying to switch the subject, or try to get out of going to school and things like that because of this. Or these things couldn't be really happening. They're just wanting attention from you right now. However, on the other flip side of that, the divorce process is really stressful for children, and some could be internalizing. And like I said, this kid was internalizing his stress and his emotions, and he ended up getting an ulcer at 6 or 7 years old, which is really scary to think about. And that a kid was so stressed out in a divorce process that happened to him. Attempt to reunite their parents by developing schemes that require them to work together. So I always think of the parent trap. They try, their parents obviously were not together, but they developed an elaborate scheme to get them back together. Or assume a caretaking role as an attempt to support or comfort the custodial parent. So like I said, that could be appropriate if they're just wanting to help out a little more around the house. It could be inappropriate, and so our jobs as parents is to create those boundaries for your children and to remind them at the end of the day, no matter what, their job is to be a kid. All right. Pre-adolescence, 9 to 12 years old. So as children mature, they become extremely aware of what's going on around them. They're interested in the content of parental conflicts. They seek information by asking adult questions and eavesdropping on adult conversations. They draw their own conclusions about whom and what they believe. They are likely to side with one parent over the other. Children this age struggle to define who they are and often feel threatened by the possibility of losing their friends or changing schools. Peer relationships become much more critical at this age. They strive to fit in with their peer group. This age tends to be easily embarrassed and may pretend to act cool in front of their parents and peers. So also this is really important. At this stage, your child hears from you what's going on with the divorce process. Because if they don't, little Joey and Sally Joe are going to go to school and they're going to say, hey, my parents are getting a divorce. And little Robert's going to come over and be like, oh, my parents got divorced. It's like this, blah, 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 blah. And that might not be an accurate depiction of what's going on in your situation. So really make sure your kids hear from you what's going on, what's going to happen next, what this is going to look like for them. Because if they don't, they're going to go to school, they're going to have these conversations, and they might be finding out or hearing things that you don't want them to. So it's really important that you as that parent foster that good communication and good conversation about the divorce process. So pre-adolescents may feel and express intense anger through verbal and sometimes physical attacks against their parents and friends, become rebellious by engaging in stealing, lying, or refusing to go to school, deny, displace, or intellectualize their feelings, complain of headaches, stomach aches, and other physical complaints, perform poorly academically, begin dating and become involved in sexual behavior, assume an adult role, acutely feel guilt and shame from the divorce, and frequently devise elaborate schemes to try to bring the parents back together. All right, the last section is talking about adolescents, also known as teenagers. The most fun stage, the most fun group of kids. So adolescence is a time of dramatic growth in each aspect of the child's life. When parents divorce, adolescents not only face the changes that normally occur during this time, but also changes that are associated with the separation of the family. Adolescents are already changing, growing. Social peer relationships are a really difficult time for them right now. You throw in a divorce and their whole world is turned upside down. So even more so with adolescents than the other age groups, we got to give them a little more grace, which is hard because, we're moving through this divorce process ourselves, but we've also got to manage and mitigate our child's trauma. We've got to give our adolescents a little more grace and compassion with their behaviors because they're adolescents. Their life is already at a really tough, difficult time. So behaviors for adolescents may include talk less and temporarily withdraw to cope with feelings and emotions, exhibit angry and rebellious behaviors through physical fighting, verbal hostility, destruction of property, and self-injuring behavior, demonstrate chronic depression, complain of headaches, stomach aches, and other physical complaints, use drugs and alcohol, become sexually active, perform poorly academically, and skip school, become preoccupied with a sense of family and adopt a caretaking role, run away from home, believe they are responsible for the divorce. And so, at this point in time, we would cultivate a conversation in the classroom about what you're seeing in your kids. If you have behaviors that you're seeing in your kids, what are they? What are you not seeing? How are you working through these behaviors? Unfortunately, we kind of can't have that conversation, but right now would be a good time to pause the video, take 5 minutes, and think and kind of inventory what behaviors you're seeing in your kids, and how you're coping with those behaviors internally, but also how you're externally coping with your children's behaviors. So externally, how are you dealing with your children when these behaviors are occurring? Do you think that's appropriate? And you might be doing a great job. You might be like, after taking this inventory, you also might be like, I need to offer them a little more grace, a little more compassion, really see where they're coming from and work on that a little bit. And that's okay if that's the case. Doesn't mean you're a bad parent, but this is a really difficult time for everyone. So think about that, process that, take a break. This would be another great little 5 to 7 minute break from the video because it is a lot that we're working through, a lot of curriculum we're working through. All right. Okay, so helping children cope. So we can help children cope by reassuring the child that they're going to be taken care of, that they're still loved, and that the divorce is not their fault. Minimize positive and negative change. So try to remain in the same school district, church, childcare, etc. Home, one of you try to remain in the same home if possible. Help child maintain contact with extended family and friends. Prepare the child for changes before they happen. So a really great example of this is a visitation schedule. If you have if your child's really having a hard time with changes, make a calendar of saying, okay, this is the day you're going to go to dad's, but this is the day you're going to go to mom's. You're going to be there 5 days, and then you're going to come back here. Having that on a calendar where they can count down, where they can see what's going to happen next, really important. Also, just putting their appointments on there, so you have a dentist appointment on this day, things like that can help prepare that child for changes and things before they happen. Acknowledge the child's anger and attempt to change those things that they find most upsetting. Allow the child to love both parents. Build security and continuity in both households by establishing roles, routines, and responsibilities in both households. Provide a stable and a secure home. Practice consistent discipline. Maintain rules and limits. So try to keep family rules the same at both houses. So bedtime is 8 at mom's, bedtime is 8 at dad's. If dad says you cannot ride your bicycle without a helmet, mom's house, you cannot ride your bicycle without a helmet. Try to maintain those rules and make sure that your child is not manipulating this co-parenting relationship. That's super, super important. But you're only going to be able to achieve that goal if you have a good co-parenting relationship and you're communicating about things. Offer the child clear and accurate information regarding the divorce and other parent. So obviously this is going to be based off the child's age and the child's development. However, you want to make sure that your child hears from you what is happening, what is going to happen, and that they're not going to school and finding out from their peers, or they're not finding out because they overheard you on a telephone conversation, or they heard from an extended family member. You're in charge of offering your child clear and accurate information. Don't go share nasty, intimate details of the divorce or why you're getting a divorce. That's not appropriate, right? But share what you can, what's age appropriate for the child so they know what is going on. And you want to allow the child to express fears, concerns, and complaints to each parent. So don't do these things. Once again, the things I'm about to talk about, don't do. Display parental hostility and rage in front of child as children get hurt when one parent hurts the other parent. Talk down the other parent. Placing the child in a loyalty conflict or a loyalty bind, which we're going to talk about those in just a minute. Asking the child to choose one parent over the other parent, which goes back to placing that child in a loyalty bind, because ultimately it's a lose-lose situation for that child. Put the child in an adult role. Rely on child for emotional support. Ask the child about the other parent. Requiring the child to relay messages between parents. Letting guilt interfere with parenting expectations or rules. So you should never be like, okay, well, I feel guilty. Little Johnny is now in a split household, so I'm going to bend my expectations or rules. That's not appropriate. If you are trying your best to mitigate harm to your child and really work through the divorce process with them, you should not be carrying any guilt. Things happen, life happens, and you should not base your parenting on basis of guilt for the divorce process. Getting involved in a relationship too soon, as parents and children need time to recover. All right, let's talk about parental conflict. Let me move this away. Okay, so parental conflict can be defined as any action, deed, or word that places a child between his parents or forces a child to choose one parent over the other. So parental conflict, just bickering or conflict between two parents that then in turn makes the child choose one parent over the other parent. So there's a really great example of this. We watch a set of videos in class. Obviously, you're not going to watch the set of videos because this is done virtually right now. But there's this little boy, Marcus, in the video. And he goes off to his dad's house, and it's his birthday. And his mom's like, you know, you're not going to get the skateboard from from your dad. We've already talked about it, etc., etc., etc. Well, he gets there. He gets to his dad's house, and what does dad do? Dad has bought Marcus a skateboard. And Marcus, is in the middle now because he's got to choose one parent. He's stuck in this parental conflict because he has to choose one parent over the other. If he chooses, and his dad says some not nice thing like, my child's not going to be a wussy, my child's going to ride this skateboard, blah, 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 on and on. And so Marcus, feels like he needs to be loyal to dad, but also needs to feel loyal to mom. And he's stuck in between because the parents did not agree about the skateboard situation. Now Marcus is stuck in the middle of that. So when divorcing parents are at war with each other, their children generally become caught in crossfire and forced into a position where there's no acceptable escape. And we call these loyalty binds, or loyalty conflicts, which we'll talk about just on the next slide. If parental conflict includes ongoing elements of verbal, emotional, or physical abuse, the children are at risk. They are much more likely to act disrespectfully towards others to treat them with disrespect. And so, parental conflict, putting your child in the middle of you two, it becomes a lose-lose situation for that kid. And we want to avoid that. All right, let's talk about loyalty binds. So loyalty binds are anything that puts your kid in the middle and makes them choose one parent over the other. So for Marcus and that skateboard, he was going to have to choose his dad and be loyal to his dad. But if he did that, he knew he would probably make his mom really upset and lose trust and respect from his mom. But if he chose his mom, his dad was over here calling him a wussy, and you're not going to be no little mama's boy. So his dad's view of him was going to change. So he wanted to keep that view, but he also wanted to respect his mom and not lose that respect for her. So what does Marcus do as a 9-year-old? And in the video, people laugh at him because they're very dramatic. They're very 90s. But it's true. I mean, loyalty binds happen every day. And we might accidentally put our kids in loyalty binds, which we need to be aware of too. So some examples of loyalty binds are asking the child to take the note back and forth, asking a child to deliver bad news to the other parent, criticisms, put-downs, or negative comments about the other parent, interrogating the child about what happens when they're with the other parent, burdening the child with guilt when parents still tell child how lonely or sad they are when they don't see the child. Situations where the child is forced to make things fair or equal between both parents. Anything that makes the two parents seem unequal in value. Anytime the child is not allowed to feel that they can have a good time at the other parent's house. So when I talk about accidentally putting our child in a loyalty bind, what I'm meaning by that is we might say, I miss you so much when you're at dad's house. And you don't mean that as you don't want them to go have a good time, but now the child might be thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to get back to my mom's house. I can't have a good time because my mom, misses me and she's really sad and lonely over there and I've got to get back as quick as I can. When really that was not our intentions at all. So just be careful with how you word things, how you say things. Just like we talked about being careful about calling or telling your kid they're the man of the house now, or you're going to be counting on their help more, because kids take words for face values and they don't dig into a deeper meaning. And so we have to be really, really cognizant and really careful of that. So this is another time to take a good little break for you guys and to think, have you put your kid in the loyalty bind? If so, how are you going to stop that going forward? What are you going to do differently? And if you haven't put your kid in the loyalty bind, how are you going to make sure or ensure from going forward you're not going to put your kid in that kind of situation because you want to have a good co-parenting relationship? So take a minute, stop and think about that, just a little pause before you continue on. All right, now we are talking about the impact on the child due to parental conflict. Hold on, I have to flip through some curriculum real quick, as we are not watching the videos because we are virtual. Which I'm sad for you guys because the videos are my absolute favorite part, because they incite a lot of discussion and they're dramatic and they're very 90s, and I think it's a good little breakup for the class. Anyways, okay. Impact of the child due to parental conflict. So parental warfare is harmful to children because it interferes with responsible parenting necessary for healthy psychological development. It alters the nature of the parent-child relationship, threatens the parent's protective role, frightens children, leads to anxiety and distress, and influences the child's identity. Parental conflict places a greater strain on a child's development than any other factor in divorce. Children live in an atmosphere of tension, uneasy alliances, and feelings of abandonment. So children who experience intense hostility are more likely to have emotional and behavioral issues as they get older. Additionally, they're more likely to have unsuccessful marriages. So the research shows that in general, boys often have more difficulty in the first few years following the divorce, both socially and academically. However, long-term studies show that girls have more significant problems later on. I don't know what research article was that was, but that is what the research says. Sorry, when you're talking for a long time, your voice starts to go out. Okay, so also I want to touch on this. Research that shows that a kid that grows up in a house of domestic violence, a boy is more likely to grow up and become a perpetrator of domestic violence, and a girl is more likely to grow up and become a victim of domestic violence. And we don't want our children becoming perpetrators of violence, or becoming victims of domestic violence. And so that's really important that we're aware of our parental conflict and we're mitigating that as much as possible, because we do not want our children to be a byproduct of a poor co-parenting relationship. All right, we're moving on and we're going to talk about parental alienation. So parental alienation syndrome is a situation in which a parent's conscious attempt at programming his or her child to dislike the other parent is combined with the child's own negative view of the so-called hated parent. In terms of domestic violence or child abuse, things like that, parental alienation does not exist. That's a whole different kind of, or it doesn't apply. It doesn't exist is the wrong term, but it doesn't apply. That's a whole different issue set. So the alienating parent may promote a belief that only one parent is good while the other parent is bad, repeat negative comments about the other parent in the presence of the child, which they may come to believe over time, claim that their child experiences separation anxiety. However, the anxiety only occurs prior to visitation with the other parent, uses the child's illness to block time-sharing plans, interrupt the child's visit in many different ways, sabotage the child's visits, magnifies the other parent's flaws. So a parent who might occasionally have a beer on a Friday night now may be referred to as an alcoholic if parental alienation is occurring, and then openly blame the other parent for separation of the family. So parental alienation is obviously bad for a number of different reasons, but this is also where counseling can help kind of be that third party. If the child's really experiencing separation anxiety, you can work with the counselor to kind of work through that, or to figure out the root cause of that anxiety, and to work on visitation and anxiety. If that really is a problem, or if they go to the counselor and we find out separation anxiety does not really exist, the counselor can be that third party and help you guys work through. Don't do parental alienation. Parental alienation is not participating in good co-parenting relationships. So if you're participating in parental alienation, stop. And the only time parental alienation does not apply, like I said, in cases of domestic violence or child abuse and things like that. All right, we are going to talk about emotions relating to divorce. I'm sorry, I accidentally put emotions relating to stress on the slide, but is actually emotions relating to divorce, anger. So we're going to talk about anger. The next emotion we're going to talk about is stress, but I'm sorry, excuse me. Okay, so anger is a natural emotion. Anger is meant to be expressed. It's just the way we express it that needs work. Because a lot of times when we're feeling angry, we just want to fly off the handle and we want to tell someone how we feel, which is not appropriate, right? It's also important for us to realize that anger is a secondary emotion. So there are 7 or 8 primary emotions, I can't remember, but anger is not one of them. Anger is secondary, so that means that anger is the result of our hurt not being expressed. So in class, we go through and we talk about how do we know we're becoming angry. So I'm going to kind of just talk through that myself. But, how I know I become angry is not how you become angry. My jaw might clench where your face might turn red. Or I might ball my hands up in a fist where you might start rolling your eyes. And so think about these things. How do you know you're becoming angry? Because we're going to talk about coping skills for anger. And if you're not emotionally aware or in touch with your body and know that you're getting angry, you're not going to be able to cope positively or appropriately with anger. So some signs your body can tell you that it's getting angry are you might become tense, stiff, you might start pointing your finger, your jaw might become firm, your eyes might become fierce looking. So what do you notice about a tone of voice when they're angry? It might be sarcastic, they might start yelling. It's probably not a very pleasant tone of voice. What do you know about the words a person chooses? So what kind of words do you choose when you're angry? Most people are not going to choose very nice words if we're angry. We're obviously angry for a reason, and we want that other person to become angry and to feel what we're feeling. So we're going to use nasty, inappropriate words or language to make them mad or make them upset and incite those feelings that we are feeling. What actions are displayed by a person who is angry? So how do you act when you're angry? Some may become violent, some might slam doors, throw things, push. You might have a physical or verbal attack. So what happens when you become angry? And then think about this. What has a greater impact, a person's tone of voice or their angry words? So if you picked that tone of voice has a greater impact, you would be right. So in studies, it was discovered that the tone of voice carried more of the meaning than the words. And children can pick up on our voice tone and our body language even when our words are not angry. So like when girls say, "I'm fine," probably not really fine, right? Their words are not angry or mean or upset, but their body language and their tone of voice are very different. And so let's talk about the disadvantages if someone stayed angry long after divorce. So think about this. This is usually a discussion question, but obviously it can't be a discussion question. So if they stayed angry long after divorce, you wouldn't move on with your life. You wouldn't solve the resulting problem, and it would probably hurt the child as a result. Because if you're angry, you're not going to have a very good relationship with your child, or you're going to project those angry feelings onto your child, and that's not going to be good for either of you. So consistent anger can make a person easily insulted, get furious at any kind of criticism. They make them feel they always have to be right, demand special consideration, like the world owes you something, and difficult to get along with at work and at home. No one wants to be around an angry person, right? And so it's really important that when you're going through the divorce process, if you realize that you're really stuck in that anger stage of grief, that you get yourself in check and you get yourself some help to get out of that phase. And because it's okay to be angry and it's okay to feel anger, but if we are consistently angry for a long period of time, then that's going to become unhealthy and it's going to affect, our coworkers, it's going to affect our co-parenting relationship, our children, etc. All right, let's talk about some coping skills for anger. So find non-violent ways to release pent-up anger energy. Be creative. A lot of people say they go exercise, they take a walk, etc. That's completely fine. I used to say running was how I released some anger. However, last year I ran the Oklahoma City Marathon, and then I stopped running. I was like, I don't know, maybe running's not my thing anymore. But be creative on how you're going to get rid of that pent-up anger energy. Express your emotional hurt or pain when you feel it and do not store it inside. So if the co-parent or your ex-partner said something to you to make you upset, stop right then and address it. Don't let it build up, because if you let it build up, then it's going to build and build and build, and then you're going to have an explosion of anger, which is not good. And if you're aware of things that can stimulate anger in you, try to avoid those situations or people. And so I use this example in my BIP class, and I also use it when I'm teaching co-parenting. So I used to, I live in Edmond and I work in Oklahoma City. So I used to come down the Broadway Extension for work every single morning. And one morning I got so angry because most of you know that far left lane, and it ends, and it says for 2 miles this left lane is ending, and I was not going to let this woman over, and she all but cut me off and made me so angry. I ended up spilling my coffee. Next thing you know, she pulls up next to me and she's cussing me out, flipping me off, and I just realized that just made me so angry, and I was like, this is not okay. My whole day is ruined. I'm so mad. I'm so angry, and I haven't even made it to work yet. And so I was like, I'm done. I'm not taking the Broadway Extension anymore. the traffic, the construction, complete mess. And I decided to start taking the back way to work. And yes, I have a stop sign every mile. It's honestly less time because no traffic. It's quiet, it's a back road, but I avoid that anger trigger now. Like that was an anger trigger for me, and I realized it, I realized that's not appropriate. So think about your anger triggers, especially think about your anger triggers with your co-parent. Certain conversations might be an anger trigger for you guys to talk about. Think about those anger triggers, and if you can avoid those anger triggers, avoid them. But avoiding conversations with your co-parent is not possible because they're your co-parent. You have to talk about things. But how can you mitigate that trigger? Prepare yourself for that conversation. Okay, I know this is an anger trigger for me. I know it really gets on my nerves that they have this point of view or the way this conversation goes. I'm going to take deep breaths. I'm going to prepare myself internally. I'm going to go in with a good attitude, remain child focused, things like that. The next tip, coping skill, is do not try to solve a problem when you're intoxicated or on an illegal substance or just having a bad day. So I'm going to reread this. I always reread it in class, but I want to make myself very, very clear. Do not try to solve a problem when you are intoxicated or on an illegal substance or just having a bad day. And also remember, which this is a whole nother conversation, but illegal substances in general, alcohol, I would not consider those coping skills for anger or positive coping skills anyways. Those are negative coping skills because when you come down off the high, when you come down off from being intoxicated, that problem's still there. You didn't release any of that anger. You just numbed the feeling of that anger. And that's our goal for coping skills is that we cope with it, we take deep breaths, and we move through it. We don't just ignore it, which is what you do when you drown your anger with alcohol or substances. And lastly, embrace your anger. Don't disown it. So to accept something is to acknowledge it exists and that you can take responsibility for your actions. When you own your anger, you can control it, and then you can work on changing how you behave. So remember, you're responsible for what you say and do. And embrace your anger. Say, yeah, I'm really upset. I'm really angry at this right now. But embrace it, because if you can embrace it, you can own it, you can work through it, right? Because if you ignore it, it's still there, and you're probably not going to cope with it, end up coping with it in a very positive way. You're going to let it build up, and then one day you're going to have an anger explosion, and things are really not going to be good. All right, let's talk about stress. So emotions relating to divorce. Stress. So stress is another emotion relating to divorce. Stress is any physical, chemical, or emotional factor that causes tension. So how does stress affect you and your behaviors? So think about that. When you're stressed out, what happens? How do you react? How do you handle situations? Usually people become very short-tempered, things like that. But think about how you react to stress or what happens when you're stressed out. So stress can cause headaches, backaches, ulcers, diarrhea, fatigue, withdrawing, irritability, weakened immune system, and anxiety. And obviously that's a short list of health problems it can cause. So what are some coping skills for stress? Because stress obviously is related to divorce. Stress is natural in everyone's life, but things like major life changes like divorce or like a pandemic going on right now increases stress. So some physical approaches to stress are getting regular exercise, improve your diet, and adequate sleep. That's like the perfect trifecta, right? You have to choose two of the three. You're never going to get three. But really try to be healthy. The healthier you can be, the better off your stress levels are going to be. And especially getting regular exercise. Even if you just decompress at the end of the day, get out and take a 20-30 minute walk around the neighborhood, down the road, to get some fresh air. and to decompress. It's going to release good endorphins, and it's going to calm you down. Mental approaches to handling stress, adopting a new attitude, right? So there's some things in life we can't change, like having to take a 4-hour co-parenting course, but we can't adopt a new attitude and say, hey, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to make the most of this opportunity. I'm going to take this time to evaluate myself as a co-parent and evaluate myself in this co-parenting relationship. Improve your communication skills, right? So we all have room for improvement. Even though I talk about communication in this class and in bed all the time, I feel like I'm talking about communication skills. I can still improve my communication skills. We all can work on our communication skills. And the harder we work and the more consistent we are at working on our communication skills, the better they are going to get. So take this time to mental approaches to handling stress. Take an opportunity to work on your communication skills with your co-parent. Get organized. The more unorganized you are, the more stressed out you're going to be because you don't know where things are, you don't know where you're supposed to be. So if you can get organized, you can mitigate some of that stress. Social approaches to cope with stress are developing a support network. So Brene Brown talks about having a square squad, and so this is a really good opportunity for you guys, after I explain this, to take a break and to figure out who's in your square squad, because when you're going through a divorce, it's really important that you have a support network of people who you can call and talk to, especially when maybe things aren't going great with your co-parenting relationship, or there might be some conflict happening there. So imagine if you draw a square and you write your name in the middle of it, and then 4 corners. Each corner should have a person's name and a phone number of people who you're in your square squad. But you want people that are going to give you good advice in your square squad. So your best friend might be a really great best friend, but they might not be in your square squad, right? They might be the kind of person that encourages bad decisions, or encourages you to say things maybe that are inappropriate, or they might encourage you to handle the situation in not the best way. So think of people that are in your square squad that you call when you're having a hard time, and that are going to give you good advice and hold you accountable for your actions. So I can think of 2 people off the bat right now that are in my square squad, and write their name down, right? And so develop a support network. That way, too, whenever you're having a bad day or having a hard time navigating your co-parenting relationship, you can call these people and say, and one of these people can be like, hey, me and Robert are just not getting along. We're having this conflict. We're not agreeing on Sally Joe's bedtime. What do you think? Like, can you walk me through this conversation? Can you help me try to figure out how I can be a better co-parent in this situation? That's what you want. And you want someone on the other end of the phone that's going to say, yeah, what's your idea? Are you being too rigid? Maybe you need to be more flexible, have some compassion for this situation. You want someone that's not just going to be like, oh yeah, you're right, Robert needs to agree with you. You don't want that kind of thing, right? So really take a pause, take a minute, and develop a support network. Develop your square squad. And letting those people know, hey, you're in my square squad, and when I call you, I need advice, and I need you to give me good advice and not stick up for me. I need you to help me work through this situation. That's why I'm calling you. Develop a social life and develop hobbies are also ways to mitigate that stress. All right, let's talk about resentment and forgiveness as emotions relating to divorce. So resentment is the feeling of displeasure or persistent ill will at something regarded as a wrong, insult, or injury. And forgiveness can be defined as the ability to let go of an injustice. It is important to forgive and stop reliving the incident that caused the hurt, but it is also important not to forget the lesson you learned from the situation. So some reasons a person might not want to forgive a former spouse are because the pain is too great. They want the other person to admit they did something wrong. They want to hear an apology out of revenge and to avoid the pain of dealing with the injustice. So it takes two to argue, it takes two to have conflict, but it only takes one person to forgive. And you are the only one that suffers as a result of holding on to resentment, and you're the only one that benefits from forgiveness, right? If you're holding on to resentment because someone wronged you, that person is living their life not thinking about that one bit. You're the only one who caused that resentment. But additionally, you're the only one that benefits from forgiveness because you're letting it go and you're able to move on with your life. All right. One more thing on resentment and forgiveness that I forgot to mention. If you're having a really hard time with letting go of some resentment or forgiving that person, whether or not you feel like they should be forgiven or not for what happened during your divorce, a counselor can be a really great resource to help you work through that. And also, if you can let go of that resentment and forgive that person no matter what, you're going to have a better co-parenting relationship, right? Because if you're holding on to resentment, that's going to come through in your co-parenting relationships, no matter how hard you try to cover it up, right? Because deep down, that resentment is still there. So make sure you work through resentment and forgiveness, because if you keep that resentment built up inside of you, you're not going to be very successful in your co-parenting relationship, because your actions are going to speak louder than your words. All right, let's talk about conflict between parents. So how does an argument start? Usually one person says something, then the next person says something a little worse, and then that person says something a little worse, and then it just builds. It's like a domino effect. We also like to think of it as like starting a fire, right? One person lights the match, the next person throws that match on the fire, and then it's just an explosion of a conflict. So who causes the conflict? Both people cause the conflict. It takes two to argue. Both of you have to be present. Not one person can't argue. Some people might be able to argue with a stick, but that's not there. It takes two people to have a real argument. And so you're both responsible for that argument. Remember at the beginning of the class, or the beginning of this video, I said that you're responsible for what you say and do no matter what. So if your ex-partner or co-parent comes at you and says something nasty or inappropriate, you have the opportunity to disengage and walk away and say, I'm not engaging, I'm not having this conversation. Or you have the opportunity to come back and start an argument by saying something nasty. Now, your ex-partner or your co-parent shouldn't have said that to begin with, right? But you're responsible for what you say and do, and you can end that conversation and walk away, or you can engage. So remember that. So lighting the match or starting that argument usually happens by having a poor tone of voice, using sarcasm, being accusatory, yelling, commanding, demanding, disrespectful, usually threatening body language, crossing your arms, big poses, and your words are criticizing, name calling, not nice things. That's what lights that match and then throw on the fire, and it starts a conflict. All right. So when should you end a conversation? So when it's non-productive or abusive, when the children are present or within earshot, when it is difficult to focus on a conversation, if you're tired, work, duties, bedtime, you shouldn't be engaged in conversation, right? Because you're not going to be able to put your best foot forward. There's more likely to be miscommunications, which are going to turn into parental conflict and arguments that could have just been avoided if you could have said, hey, I don't have my full attention to give to this right now. When you are finding yourself too angry or out of control to talk. So it's okay to say, hey, I'm angry, I'm upset, I need a timeout. It's just the way we do that needs work, right? So a lot of times we just get like upset or angry and we just walk out of the room and we're like, peace out. That's inappropriate. That's not how this works. If you're feeling too angry or out of control to talk, you need to calm yourself for the time being and tell your co-parent or your ex-partner, hey, I'm really angry, I'm really upset. This situation is causing me a lot of feelings. I need a break. If we could have 30 minutes, or we could have a day so I can really process this, I'd be happy to talk to you about this at this time, this day. Be specific so you're not just walking away. Does that work for you? If not, is there a better time that works for you that we can reconvene and have that conversation? And by taking a break, it's your job to go calm down, collect your thoughts, use your coping skills for anger, breathe, work through it, and come back to that conversation knowing that you're going to be calm, cool, and collected and attempt to work through it and find the best solution that is child focused. All right, so this is another handout that we give you in class. And so I just kind of wanted to go through it. You can take a screenshot of it. It's a really good reminder. So, we talked about how when you start an argument, it's like lighting a match, fueling a fire. So you can defuel the fire or take control of the conflict and defuse it by using self-control, breathing, watching your tone of voice, watch your body language, use STPA, which stands for Stop, Think, Pause, Act. We'll talk about that in a minute. Listen to the other co-parent, stay child-focused, which is the whole goal of this curriculum. Reflect on what you heard. So use your communication skills. What I'm hearing you saying is use I statements, which we're going to talk about. Use facts and observations. Don't make assumptions. We've already talked about that. Stay present focused and address only one issue at a time. So opposite of that, you can fuel the fire or add more matches to that fire and make it bigger by responding before you think, threaten, criticize, use sarcasm, demand or command, use judgments, stay past focus, change subjects or distract, interrogate, ignore or withdraw, focus on winning, and dominate the conversation. So the things on the left, which might be your right, I don't know, are defueling the fire. Those are things that we want to do when we're in conflict resolution. The things on the other side, fueling the fire, are things that we don't want to do because they're going to make the fire bigger and they're going to make the conflict more out of control. And think about this. This is another great time to stop, think, pause, reflect. What do I do that I maybe fuel the fire? And maybe I don't intentionally do that, but you know what? Maybe I use sarcasm a lot, and I need to watch that, especially when I'm in conflict, because it probably makes it worse. And then what can I do over here? What can I work on? I can work on using I statements. I can work on being child focused. So pick 2 or 3 things that you're going to work on when it comes to defueling the fire and working on that co-parenting relationship. Excuse me. All right, conflict resolution, the 3 W's. So you want to when, where, and what. So you want to find the right time to talk. So you want to make sure this is when you're not tired, not when you're making a transition with the child, when you are free from distractions, and check with the co-parent to make sure it's a good time for them. We talk about, send them a text message, say, hey, I really want to talk about this matter. Would tonight at 7:30 be a good time to have a conversation about this? And does that work for you? That way you are scheduling a time to talk, and that co-parent has a heads up of, hey, we need to have a discussion about bedtime, or we need to have a discussion about Sally Joe's behavior at school, and they're not blindsided in the conversation. Where? Find the right place to talk. If you have to talk in a public place at a Starbucks or a Panera because that's the only place you're not going to lose your cool, then okay, so be it. And you don't want to make it where the children can overhear. Make sure your child have an activity to go do something. Don't do it in the same home that your child is in at that moment, because we don't want any chance that our child could overhear this conversation. And what topic to discuss. So finding a solution must be your goal. So if you're calling to share your opinion, okay, that's fine, but your goal is not to change that other person's opinion. So an appropriate topic of conversation might be if the co-parent's interfering with a part of parenting that you're responsible for, then a meeting to set boundaries might be an appropriate topic of discussion. If your goal is to solve the problem, then the topic should clearly be one that affects the child. So you're not calling to talk about the girlfriend or this or that or anything about them. It should remain child focused, and it should remain to get to a goal. If you're don't want to get to a goal or to solve a problem, then you probably shouldn't be having the conversation. All right, the next conflict resolution skill is the 3 Ps. So you want to focus on the present, not on the past. You want to focus on the problem, not the person. So talk about bedtime, homework, child's attitude, not the way these things are being handled. Focus on one problem, not the universe, right? And so research has shown that women can think about, and we're more fluid in our brains. We can, go across the continuum, think about different things. Where men, they need to, their brains are more wired to think about one thing at a time. And it's actually better a lot of times if we think about and focus on one thing at a time, not try to solve bedtime, homework, child's attitude all in one. Because when that happens, more than likely we're just going to end up in a conflict and we're going to fuel that fire. However, if we say this conversation is to talk about Sally Joe's bedtime, then this conversation is to talk about Sally Joe's bedtime. And if Robert or Maria get off track talking about Sally Joe's bedtime, they can say, hey, no, we're talking about Sally Joe's bedtime right now. If we want to talk about Sally Joe's school attitude, that's going to have to be a different conversation because we have to solve the problem of Sally Joe's bedtime right now. All right, conflict resolution tips. So we want to avoid playing with the matches. So remember I said we don't want to do anything about fueling the fire. We don't want to use sarcasm. We want to watch our tone of voice. We know our body language, etc. We want to do things that are defusing the fire, defueling that fire. So use I statements. That was on defueling the fire. So for those of you who don't know what I statements are a way of stating your emotion, because even if someone's actions made you upset, made you feel insecure, made you feel rejected, those are still your emotions, and you need to take charge of those and be responsible for those emotions. So instead of saying, you really made me upset because you didn't come home on time and it made me afraid because I didn't know where you were, that's very accusatory to the other person, and that puts that other person on the defense. Whereas if you use an I statement such as, I feel upset or anxious when you don't come home and don't call because I think something has happened to you and there's no communication there. What I like to see is if you're going to be coming home late from work more than an hour and a half, you please let me know so I know what's going on and I know that you're working late. So I statements are really good because you can get your point across, and using an I statement sounds a lot less accusatory and a lot less judgmental than saying, you did this to me, you made me upset. Okay, that person did probably make you upset. Their action made you upset, but you're upset and you need to own that feeling and that action. So using STOP, or STPA, stop, think, pause, act. This is a really great short acronym to remember because stop. So before when something happens, before you act or before you respond, stop. See like a big red stop sign that's flashing in your head. Stop, think about it. So think before you respond, pause again and think, okay, is that really what I want to say? And then act. Because this method allows for a lot of processing before you act on that situation, before you make a decision. And if you stop, think, pause, and then act, you're less likely to make a bad decision or say something that you really don't mean to say. So the last thing on this is to remind you that co-parenting is forever. So you have now changed your marital status, but because you have children, you will remain now and forever co-parents. Your job is to make this relationship work so that you can be successful in your role of providing the best possible environment for your child's healthy upbringing. You won't agree on everything. You will have different opinions, different values, and different concerns. However, if you are dedicated to the goal of raising a child with as little stress and anxiety as possible and with the greatest degree of happiness and self-esteem possible, Then you will overcome the pressures of different opinions and values. You will work towards negotiating solutions. All right, so let's review. I don't have the review up on the screen for you, but I've got it in my binder. So I'm just going to go over the review, and then we will be done. So co-parents put their child's needs first. So remember, we are child-focused. A clear plan can help. So consistent discipline, routines, allowance, education, and/or childcare. Informed parents try to with each other, share parenting duties and responsibilities, communicate directly with each other, not through the child, in a respectful manner, settle disagreements in constructive ways, support each other's parenting decisions, give their child clear, consistent messages, take time to nurture themselves and let go of stress. With the child, keep control, but give their child choices between acceptable options so they can practice decision making. Have open communication, teach and listen and involve their child in problem solving, be active in their child's life, know where their child is and what they're doing, encourage independence, but respond to their child's needs. Communication is key to a strong team. Use I statements and avoid you messages. Be an active listener. Stop what you're doing and listening. Pay attention. Check your understanding. Pick a good time to talk when you're both calm and things are quiet. When co-parents disagree, calm down, talk it out, come up with as many solutions as you can. Think of the advantages and disadvantages of each and agree on the best solution. Tips regarding your child when co-parents disagree. Don't pull your child into the disagreement. Do not fight in front of your child, especially about parenting issues. If your child hears or sees you disagree, make sure they can also see you solve the problem. Make sure your child knows they're not to blame for your conflicts. Every child needs discipline. Learn about different techniques. Learn age-appropriate discipline techniques. Make rules and limits clear and specific. Be consistent. Give your child plenty of positive attention. Never hit or shake your child. Always try to let your child know you still love him or her, even if you don't love how they're acting. Tips for successful co-parenting. Create a united front. Try to agree ahead of time on general discipline, strategies, rules, and consequences. Then be sure to support each other's decisions unless there's a safety risk. Avoid sending conflicting messages or decisions. It can confuse the child and give the child the ability to pit one parent against the other. Call a parents' meeting when you disagree. Meet privately and not in the child's presence. Stay involved and active in your child's life. Be good role models. Give each other a chance to learn. Learn more about parenting together. Share books and resources. Discuss what you have learned. Remember to focus on the child's needs. Be polite to your co-parent. Make a parenting plan. Try to keep lines of communication open. Respect each other's values and rules. Discipline effectively. Do not use your child as a weapon. Be creative in keeping in touch. Let your child be a child. So thank you for being engaged in this presentation. I know it's kind of weird seeing me on video, not being in class. Divorce is not easy for anyone, but with some thought and preparation, it can be tolerable and can offer you a new start. You can protect your child from emotional harm by following the co-parenting ideas that we've discussed here today. Both you and your child can begin to enjoy your new life and the opportunities it presents you. If you have any questions about anything, the resource guide, your certificate, etc., you can contact our office. Like I said at the beginning of this presentation, it is currently closed, but you can call us at 405-232-8226 or text that number. You can rewind the presentation. I just don't know it off the top of my head. Once again, my name is Caitlin. So if you have questions and you want them directed towards me, just tell them, hey, I watched a co-parenting class. Can you get me in touch with Caitlin? And they'd be more than happy to do so. Once again, thank you for engaging and listening in. I hope you take all the tips, do all the activities, and engage as positive co-parents.